welcome to the Patricia Jo Grover Show, where we turn believers into achievers. And today, my guest is Mary Jo Van Horn. Mary Jo, growing up on a small North Dakota dairy farm, the promise Mary Jo inherited was that working really hard was the path of self worth. But by the time she hit her mid 50s, Mary Jo ended up most days feeling stressed out, burned out, and mostly worthless. It wasn't until she recognized the flaw in the well-intentioned promise that Mary Jo's life's transformed. The flaw was buried in the emotional baggage, and learning to release it freed Mary Jo to live in partnership with her self-care, confidence, and her inherent self-worth. Helping others recognize and release their emotional baggage is the foundation of Mary Jo's work today. She's on a mission for all humanity to go to bed at night feeling emotionally safe. Please welcome Mary Jo Van Horn. Thank you, Mary Jo, for joining me.
Oh, thank you, Patricia Jo, for having me.
Yeah, it's always wonderful. We've met in another women's group, and it's really important. These kinds of topics are really important.
Yes, it feels like it is what the world needs, or what our country needs right now, as it relates to politics and the emotions that are coming up for people around politics, the families that honestly are being torn apart because of opposing political views, the friendships that are being shredded, and people are just left scratching their head and with the ache in their heart, not knowing what to do, not knowing how to fix it, not knowing how to make things better. So yes, I really appreciate being able to speak from my heart around this topic, and see if we can help people heal.
Right, right. And this is true. I was a licensed cosmetologist for many years, and being behind the chair and you're dealing with people on an intimate level, but there's things you learn that you shouldn't really talk about that much, and one of those things are religion and politics. Those are some of the big things that you have to. There's a fine line to walk there, and I know it tears some families and friendships apart. So, right.
It is, and that's part of my mission, is to help people open up, right? And to help people know that it's okay to talk about our emotions. And in fact, I think it's very much needed. Not as adults, but even more so than with our children, with the youth of the world. And so, yeah, hopefully what we talk about today will shed some light on that and help people to have conversations with a lot more ease and grace.
Right. And again, right now, it's a hot topic, and but to separate the difference of the emotions that we all have regarding whatever topic may be, but having that level head and being able to communicate as level-headed adults, and teaching children how to communicate with a level head. And because we all have our thoughts and opinions on things, and we are the United States, and we are supposed to be able to express the way we feel. But all this stuff that's going on, and this rioting stuff, that's like way off base. We need to be able to communicate with each other. We need to be able to do things non-violently. And any of the stuff that is causing, again, the looting, the vandalism, the stuff like that. It doesn't matter when it comes to that stuff. In my opinion, it doesn't matter what if you have stripes, if you have polka dots, you know, if you know, it doesn't matter what color you are, what race, what religion or whatever. If you choose to um, vandal and loot, that's that's theft and destruction of property and everything like that. So when it comes to people trying to use that as a scapegoat, that that's no way. We have to all find a way to control our emotions. We can have them, but control them and be level-headed about our conversations.
Yes. And I think what I want to highlight today in our time together is the power, if you will, of our emotions, or perhaps influence is a better word, is the influence of our emotions. And what I mean by that, as it relates to politics, is that I believe we choose our political viewpoint based on emotion.
Oh yes.
And then we seek out evidence, and that emotion comes from deep within. And it can, I think, for most of us be at a subconscious level, right? And it is attached to the emotions that hurt the most for us.
And our
And
belief windows, you know. Yes.
yes. Yeah. So for instance, for me, growing up, as you said in the introduction, I grew up on a small dairy farm in North Dakota. And as a kid, watching TV or just hanging out in the house was not acceptable. And so lots of times, if I got caught, I always heard, Mary Jo, get your worthless butt outside, right?
Oh, yep.
And you hear that over and over and over. And in order to make sense of it, I created the belief, I'm worthless, right? It wasn't
Right.
my mom's intention, but it is how I internalized it to make sense of why she was yelling at me to always be outside and I couldn't hang out in the house. And so for me, that's where this subconscious, belief just sat with me. And so there was this sense of worthlessness within me. And when I think about or reflect on that, that sense of worthlessness brought about the emotions of feeling diminished, disempowered, insecure. And when I became aware of this, I realized that my adult life, when it came to politics, I've always been drawn to the candidates or the policies that aim to help people, at least how I perceived them to be, was policies that aim to help people feel heard, feel empowered, and feel confident.
That's
Right?
why
And
you and I connect, because that's what I do, and that's what I do with people. And that's my gift, or that I my purpose that I'm bringing to the world is, the more people I can touch in a positive way,
yes,
the better.
yes. And until I realized that I was carrying that belief, right? And I believed that to be true for me, right? I was subconsciously, I think mostly subconsciously, fighting against the candidates and the policies that I perceived to be or to feel contrary to those things, right? And so I'd feel triggered around those candidates and messages and the policies that felt contrary to them, because I would go right back to that little girl that felt worthless, right? and that hurt, right? Those emotions of feeling diminished and disempowered and insecure, I mean, those hurt. And so I acted from that place of hurt, and often immaturely, because, right, because I went back to that little girl, right? And I think that's what happens when we get triggered. We go back to that younger self that made up stuff about ourself and life in general in order to make sense of things.
I think
And
people do that.
sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, they act like they're, yes, they act like they're, 8 years old. And that's why, right? Or they throw a tantrum like they're a 3-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why, right? Because we'll go back to that. Now, when I finally, recognized that belief, I could see then as the adult, that I was, and I was in my mid-50s by the time I learned how to look at my past, at those emotions that hurt, and see it for what it was, and to have that belief, revealed to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I could consciously say, oh, okay, I get it. I understand that now. And I know that it's not true. I know that I am worthy of all goodness just because I was born. Right. And so up until that point, though, it became kind of this fight between, on the one hand, having some level of knowing that I deserve, goodness, I am worthy. But then, right, on the other hand, having that belief subconsciously that no, you're not. No, you're not. You're pretty much worthless. Right. And then that's where all that internal conflict comes. And I think that's where all the upset and the frustration and the shutting down or the exploding that happens when we have dialogue that is contrary, right, to what we really want. Does that make sense?
Exactly. Mary, I work with so many people that are having just the same experiences and feelings that you have had. I work with people like that every day. And it is not, and I'm glad that this topic is coming up on my show. I applaud you for sharing this. It really is so prevalent in today's society, because of things that, we look back and the stuff like you shared that was said to you. And the thing is, your mother didn't necessarily do it intentionally or say those things intentionally to be hurtful to you, but she may have had those words or similar words to those said to her, and the expectations that children at that point in time, you got out of the house, you got up, had breakfast, and if you weren't off to school, you were out of the house, and you were about,
Yes.
that you were expected to stay outside all day long. And
Yes.
and they didn't,
Because there was always work to be done
right,
outside.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. So
On the farm.
right,
Yes.
yeah, exactly. And so, there are so many people, and this is a real thing. And I teach people all about the belief windows, and that, from where we get that those goggles, those lenses that we look through. We look through those panes of that glass, and that's how we only can see our life as. And the thing is, taking what once you get to be able to notice that yourself, and accept that and understand, then you can start taking those pieces and breaking them down. And that's the thing, you got to break them down and really, dig to the bottom of this, and all those things, and you will gain so much power
Yes.
and energy from that, to be able to, at this point, stand firm and be strong, and use it to power you, to move you forward. And I applaud you for that. And because it's all something we all have to learn. And nobody, as much as I can tell clients that, and as much as I can tell you that, until we take that in ourselves, we have to know and take that love for ourselves. We need to
Yes.
learn to, not only we need to like ourselves, we need to trust ourselves, and we need to learn to love ourselves. And until we do
Yes.
that, those cycles are going to keep on happening.
Yes. Yes. I love, because so for me, this whole topic of you know, loving others, loving your family members, regardless of their political viewpoints. So it has that self-awareness dynamic, which we just talked about. But then also along with that is the family dynamic. So growing up, let's just say, if you're struggling, let's just say right now, if you're struggling to have conversations about politics with your siblings, or with your parents or with your in-laws, right? There's the family dynamic of most likely when you were growing up that can come into play. So let's just say if you were um, a kid that just felt like, you never got the attention, or you had to fight to be heard. You had to fight for somebody to take you seriously, right? And usually with that, there's resentment that builds, or whatever that may be. And then now that resentment is playing out, right? So we don't only trigger back to how we felt about ourselves, but then also what those family dynamics might have been. And I
Right.
think there's a lot of people, too, that when it comes to politics, right, there's oftentimes a family tradition of a certain political party or a certain viewpoint. And for a lot of people, it's kind of that unspoken thing where if you stray from that, right? If you stray, you betray. And if you betray, what are you going to be cast out of the family? Are you going to be, not liked? And so I think there's a lot of those family dynamics that we can look at, people who just grew up learning to not disappoint their parents, or learning then uh, to not disagree with their spouse. I've worked with women who, and when it comes to politics, right, they are scared to speak up with their own viewpoint, with their own thoughts, right? Because and for a lot of them, it's just like, well, he's the more dominant person. He's the more dominant personality, and they struggle to speak up.
Right.
Um, yeah. So I think and honestly, I think the gift in what is going on with our politics these days, the gift is in the opportunity for we all have, just like you said, to bring about this deep level of self-awareness first, and then see how that just has rippled out to family
Right.
and very dear friends,
Right.
right?
And
You
what
change within yourself first, and then you can change it in the others around you.
right. And what I would say is, again, once you know yourself, know what your core values are, and again, you could be so much different than how you were raised, and obviously you've learned that for yourself. And the thing is, though, Mary, you can be in a family, and I don't know how many siblings you have, but you can have the same mother and father, and each child comes out totally different. You all had the same rules and everything that you
Yes.
had to go by, but you all have different career paths, different life choices that you've made, and so it is understandable why so many people may have so many in one family have so many different political views, because it really
Yes.
depends on how you see it affecting, and those choices and decisions the government makes, how it affects you and your life and the life of your family's future. So, you
Yes,
know,
absolutely.
right,
It's all in how we each process our emotions.
right,
Because I was sixth out of seven kids, and I can remember far enough back to know that 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 phrase was used with all of us, right? And so it depends on how each one of us process that. I took it to a place of worthlessness. I'm not sure what each of my siblings, where they took it to. Another example of that, to speak to your point, um, one of mom's go-to phrases when she got mad and was yelling was, "Haven't you got a blank blank brain in your head?" And I know, like, most of my siblings have always joked about it. And as an adult, I could kind of laugh along, but I was like, in the pit of my stomach, it just grinded me. And, as I started doing this work on myself, I also came to realize, like, I carried this, um, I'm not smart enough belief as well. So now my siblings, like, hear me talk about the work that I'm doing, and talk about my emotions, and it's kind of like, they look at me like, a deer in the headlights.
right.
So I don't think it's really resonating with them on this deeper level, so I can't speak to that. But I totally agree with you that we can be raised by the same parents in very similar fashion, but yet have very different emotions, which then will bring about um, very different, resonance with the political candidates or policies.
Right. And just life choices in general. It really, really, really does affect that, Mary. So, with all of that, where do you see um, stuff changing in the future? Where can you see a positive spin come on this?
Okay, so what I envision is when for people to do this work, for people to do their inner work, and um, just take the time to recognize their emotions, to, and I always say, to caress the ones that hurt the most. And by that I mean, I don't mean to go back and sit in that pain or dwell in the pain of those experiences or those emotions that don't feel good, but to just, like, caress them so that you can then release them, right? So as long as we're carrying those different beliefs, those flaws, um, nothing's going to change for us. And so to do the work is the first step. Um, and so to recognize what those emotions are for you, to recognize what those untrue beliefs are for you, um, and then from a place of love and compassion to release them, right? Because we created them as kids from a place of self-love, right? From a place of wanting to understand and needing some sense, or needing to make sense of them. And so what really came from a place of self-love. And so when we can also then release them from a place of self-love, that gives us the opportunity to, let's say specifically for politics, to stop fighting against what you don't want and start taking a stand for what you do want. And that's the change that I'd like to see. And it can start around the Sunday dinner table with, because this is what I want all of you listening to imagine, right? So if you've experienced those dinner conversations that politics came up and it just ended, in a fight or people yelling or people shutting down. Um, what if each of you knew, right? Each of you did this inner work, and it's not, it doesn't take a long time, and it doesn't have to be hard. But if each of you did your own inner work and you knew, right? You knew what compels you as it relates to politics, to the right, to those core values, to the people then that you want to help. And it's almost always, like, for me, the people that I want to help, that I want to see this country support and influence, are the people who, just like me, struggled with their sense of self-worth. And I want to help people feel heard, feel empowered, and feel confident, knowing that they are worthy of all goodness. And so for other people, it may be something different. But for, that, I worked with a 20-something-year-old earlier this year, and that his biggest change he wanted to see was a better relationship with his dad. And their current relationship just came to a grinding halt around politics. And what he came to realize was he had taken on the belief of, I don't belong. And when it came to politics, he realized that kind of what he was very naturally drawn to were the policies and the candidates that supported communities that most likely feel like they don't belong here in this country. And then with that level of understanding, to be able to communicate that, right? That gives you the knowing, and it also gives you then the words to share with others. And so what I'd love to see is that dinner table, that Sunday dinner conversation, with each person sharing, this is what I learned about myself. And when it comes to politics, this is what I'm naturally drawn to, right? So if somebody were to hear me share how, how I grew up believing I was worthless. And I now know that it's not true. And that gave me the ability to see that I'm just naturally drawn, right, to policies that support empowerment and confidence and people feeling seen and heard, right? And I think that brings a level of, number one, curiosity for people. Because I think the first thing, if I were to do that with my siblings, the first thing would be, and I've had this conversation somewhat, not specific to politics, but specific to that belief of I'm worthless. And they're just like, really? That's what you were dealing with, or that's what you believed about yourself, right? So there's curiosity, and then there's compassion. And I think if everybody went around the table and were able to share from that core of them, right, from a soul level, like, this is what I learned about myself. This is my political why. This is what I'm so drawn to. And then you listened to each of them with curiosity and compassion. To me, what that brings about is the opportunity then for us to stop fighting and start taking a stand for. And even, right, when you think about, I'm taking a stand for, then the other person can be like, okay, I get that. I understand that. I'm taking a stand for something different. But then how could those two come together? Or how can we support each other? Does that make sense?
Right. That makes all kinds of sense. That type of communication would be key, not just in a family discussion about politics. That would be key in so many different topics of conversation if people came about it in that manner. that normally there was a clash. So that's,
Yes.
that's fantastic. And what I get this from this too, again, besides politics, is to learn to know, like, and trust and love yourself. And when you can do that and help other people to be able to do that also,
Yes.
you are coming from a place that you are in such a comfort level and such a comfort zone. There's less of the collision and less of the confrontation, that that there's not as much aggression that comes out of that. You're coming, from a sense of peace, and
Yes.
I through the struggles, and I don't know if you had heard some of the story of my background as a child, but I had a childhood that most people couldn't conceive, let alone believe, and through that, it followed me and trickled into my adulthood.
Hmm.
I've been through 3 divorces through bad situations, and um, so I've learned, all of that, and my belief window went, I've had many different views. But what I have done is learned from all of those things, and it has only empowered me. And what I do with my clients, is I encourage, and I encourage everybody, and for whatever they're going to do, you have to. I encourage and I educate and I empower. If we encourage people to, again, learn to know, like, and trust themselves, they are going to be able to communicate their feelings um, a healthier level of communication. And when you know what it is, who you are, and what it is you want out of life,
Hmm.
then it's going to help you make the choices more, that are going to be more beneficial to you in so many different categories, including politics. For what you need it for you for, and again, that doesn't mean it's still going to be the same thing for any of the other siblings in your family. Again, but being able to communicate about that without having fights around the dinner table and ruining relationships, that's huge, because we all are on this earth together to make the best lives that we can for ourselves.
Absolutely. And for a lot of people, I think what is possible to come up is when they realize what has compelled them to choose their political viewpoint. For example, in that instance of where it's like, well, I can't go against my family, right? I can't go against that family tradition. And when you actually become consciously aware of that, there is the opportunity to say, well, you know what? Okay, now I see where I've just always been so driven to stay in that
Right.
lane, to stay that. But, now I'm going to think for myself. And this is what I truly think. And so it may give the opportunity for people to get more aligned
And
with
become
what
empowered,
is true
right?
for them. Yes, and be empowered. And to what you spoke just now, Patty, right? Our actions will always line up with what we believe to be true for us, whether we're aware of those beliefs or not.
You are right. You are
Right?
100% right, Mary. Yep.
Yes. And so when we can clear out that the, I love the term emotional baggage, and I'm on a mission to make that okay. There is nothing to be ashamed of
No.
or blamed for as it relates to your emotional baggage.
Right.
And when we can clear that with love and compassion and believe what is true for us, what is inherently true for us, right? Then our actions are going to be different. And then our results are going to be different. And it will be much more aligned with what we want instead of with what we don't want.
Exactly. And I talk about baggage in my book. Yes, we all have it.
Okay.
We all have
Yes.
it. So name it and claim it. Claim it. We
Yes.
all have it. Claim it, deal with it. It is yours. Own it. But, take that and really unpack it. Figure
Hmm.
out what get rid of this. Get rid of this. Get rid of this. It's junk. It's holding you back. You know, find the power in it to move you forward.
Yes. There is so much wisdom and treasure in our emotional baggage. And
Exactly.
it is a very good thing, to take a look at it, right? Because when we carry it, it doesn't feel good
Oh,
on
you're
some level.
hauling it around, and it's slowing you down, baby. It's slowing you down.
Exactly. And because it doesn't feel good,
Right.
we look for ways to cope, right? That is what, and for me, it was turning to food to feel better,
Right.
which is literally shoving it down.
Right.
So I didn't have to feel it.
Right. And
Or,
some people it's food, some people it's drugs, some people it's alcohol.
yep,
And that is trying to find ways to cope to have it not feel so bad. Right.
yes, yes. For some people, it's shopping.
Yep. Or
Yep,
gambling, or yep,
work,
work.
throwing themselves into their work.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly.
Yes,
And this is
yes,
and everybody that's listening, this is so true. We're having such a real conversation. So if you totally agree with us, make a comment below, because we're here sharing the real,
yeah,
and it is. And if
yes.
somebody tells you they haven't had any of the feelings of the stuff that we've been talking about, they're fibbing to you. They're fibbing
To
to you.
themselves.
Well, exactly. But if they're trying to tell you they haven't,
Oh,
but they're definitely fibbing to themselves.
yes.
Yeah.
And here's what was really interesting for me, Patricia Joe. My daughter was 18 years old when I learned this work for myself. And I was really curious, and she was open to me, helping her see um, what her emotional baggage was. And for me, I was so curious because her childhood was very different circumstance wise than mine.
Right.
We had a beautiful home. We took wonderful vacations. We had more than enough money, which were different, very different than what I grew up with. And so, and I honestly thought, gosh, I wonder though, what could she be dealing with, or what could she be hanging on to that wasn't true? And she did. Um, it was through very different circumstances, but she also had, an untrue core belief about herself. And so the circumstances can be very different between you and your kids, but that doesn't mean your kids aren't creating their own emotional baggage. Um, and here's the thing, they will, kids will always have a takeaway
Oh,
from
always,
every
always,
experience.
always.
Always, yes. And it's almost never what we intend as parents, but
Oh
they
no.
will always have that takeaway. And that's where I think when us as adults can learn this for ourselves, we then can just, as parents, as aunts and uncles and grandparents, we can model that for the kids, for the youth in this world. And then here's what happens is when you get really clear on your emotional baggage and releasing it with love and compassion, and let's just bring it back to politics one more time. When you know your political why, and that feels good for you, that feels true for you, then you don't need others to agree with you.
Right.
Right? It takes that fight out of it. And then when you look at, and I want to take that word fight out of the vocabulary, even as it relates to this is what I'm fighting for, right? Because just the word fight, what does that imply?
Aggression.
Aggression. It implies a winner and a loser,
Mm-hmm.
right? And let's take the word fight out of our vocabulary and instead say, this is what I'm taking a stand for. And when I visualize that phrase, I'm taking a stand for, I visualize like, oh, you probably can't see it, but like I'm standing
Standing up,
tall,
right. You're right.
upright, hands on my hips, and then others next to me are interlocking their arms.
Right.
And next to them are interlocking their arms. I guess these days, more
Right.
virtually,
Right.
energetically. But right then, that's a, like you said, it's a pose of empowerment. And then I think it's much easier for people to band together and focus on what they are taking a stand for,
Mm-hmm.
that is put in a positive sense,
Right.
rather than spending all this energy and drama on what they are fighting against.
Right.
How would that, what if the political ad campaigns took that approach 100%?
Oh, compared to all the other BS they're slinging, oh,
Yep.
you know, just the negativity itself in and what one will say about the other and this and that, and it's they waste. I wish I had the money that they waste on political ads. I that if that went into our economy, just imagine, you know. So
Yes.
yeah, so
Yes, and
uh,
what if every elected official did this work on themselves? And they actually got to their why on a soul level, on an emotional level, and then either lined up with it, took a stand for it, or changed it, depending on
right,
what it
right.
was really lining up with.
Right. And that so yeah,
Wow.
yep, exactly. And there, you know, everybody has their feelings and opinions when it comes to politics. So I'm not pushing one way or the other. As a leader, I'm a leader. By heart, I'm a leader and I'm a person. I'm not a pusher and I'm not a puller. I'm a leader and I lead by example. And I think more people should be doing that. And that even that includes political, you know, people that and you know, whatever they are. And again, you're saying, and I love the term taking a stand for rather than fighting for.
Yes.
That's fantastic, Mary. So thank you.
Yes.
Um,
And living in partnership with our political system.
well, it was created for us for a reason. It,
Yes.
it, it really was when we founded this country. So, but you know, and there are things that you know may need a little revamping because that's been quite a while. You know, when you think about that, and some of the laws that are on the states in some of the books on in the United States really need some revamping too. So, um, so wonderful to have you and be able to have this discussion and because it can be a very um spirited conversation, we'll say, at dinner tables and stuff. But
Yep.
really, to break it down and understand why you may be drawn to one political party or person, you know, and whatever, it makes more sense when you break it down and think about it this way.
Yes.
Yep.
And then band together, support others that have that like-minded viewpoint, and let go of needing everybody around you to agree with you.
Right. Right.
Right? Stop fighting to be right,
Yep. That's
and
true.
then take a stand for what you want. And I think it'll dramatically increase the potential of it all coming together for the greater good.
Right. And right, exactly, fabulous. Well, thank you, Mary. Mary, what do you have any special gifts or anything for our viewers
I
today?
do. I do actually. I am so committed to this work, and again, like I am on this mission. My life's mission is for all of humanity to go to bed at night feeling emotionally safe. So, for a time, I am offering a no-cost 30-minute virtual life coaching session with me. Sign up. The link is, oh, do you have the link, Patty?
It is, and I can read it here.
Okay.
It's HTTPS // Mary Jo Van Horn at youcanbookme.com.
Yep. Mary Jo Van Horn dot. You
Dot.
can
You
book
can.
me.com and come book a no cost session there for 30 minutes. Ask me anything you want to ask me. Let's talk about what you are struggling with. And maybe we can take a bit of a dive into your emotional baggage and see some of the wisdom and the goodness in there. This is the work that needs to be done. And Patricia Jo, thank you so much for what you are doing in this area. And thank you so much for this opportunity to spend time with you and your viewers.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mary. So this has been the Patricia Jo Grover Show, where we turn believers into achievers. You can find out more about me at patriciajogrover.com. And I do have gifts for everybody that's on listening and watching. There's a little video that's going to follow behind. And I would love to, get, because I have assignments, because I give assignments. It's time to put the big girl panties on and get to work. So you'll have those assignments in the video behind here. It's a text-in offer. Until next time, thank you for being with me.